It's the Sports Peninsula podcast coming up. The Lions went to Arlington to take on the Dallas Cowboys and made a significant statement in their 47-9 trouncing of the Cowboys on Jerry Jones' 82nd birthday. However, there was a significant setback in the game as Aiden Hutchinson was lost for the season after suffering a broken leg early in the third quarter. Now the Lions ready themselves to go to Minnesota to take on the undefeated Vikings this Sunday and are looking for answers at defensive end. We'll talk about both games and options at defensive end for the Lions. Now here is your Sports Peninsula team. Welcome everybody to the Sports Peninsula podcast. My name is Dave Drzinski Drew. It is October 19th, a Saturday, and we're here to talk Detroit Lions football. And joining me, of course, Marine City Mariner coach Andy Shield. Andy, how you doing?
Doing well, Drew. Doing well off of a big victory ourselves. The Jackson Vikings came over to East China Stadium. They were on the road, and I will end things with a trivia question. We're going to actually have that trivia question now, and the answer will be revealed after I get done with the score and our update of the game. What is the name of Jackson High School's football stadium? We'll come back to that here in a moment. But they came to the East China Stadium. This is a good football team. Much larger school than Marine City, probably a playoff team in Division III. And the Mariners were able to outpace them. We created some turnovers on defense, and our offense, really capitalized on those. 50-26 victory for the Mariners. It was a big one. Moved our season record to 6-2. So we are sitting tight. And then we have the Trailblazers of Detroit Central next Friday, which we'll be preparing for throughout the weekend. Another big game from another quality opponent. But Drew, do you have any guesses on that stadium name?
Well, I immediately go to the Madison Heights Jim Meyer Stadium. I wonder if it's on par with that. But no, I do not have any legitimate guesses. It would truly be a shot in the dark. So I'm curious to hear the answer to this.
The Jackson Vikings play at Tony Dungy Field. Tony Dungy graduated from Jackson Parkside High School, which consolidated with Jackson High School sometime, I want to say, in the late 70s, early 80s. And that stadium has been renamed Tony Dungy Field. It's monikered on the field. Beautiful turf stadium. Like I said, they came to East China, which is also a beautiful turf stadium. But that's where they play. And Jackson Vikings. Marine City 50, Jackson 26. So it was a great day to be a Mariner, as it is always every day.
It's outstanding. Looking forward to another good playoff run from you guys. So good luck, Coach. We'll be certainly talking up through that point. So hopefully we're talking deep into November, right?
Absolutely.
Let's talk about the Detroit Lions, Coach. Week 6, Detroit 47, Dallas Cowboys 9. The Lions made a significant statement in this game, several statements. I believe the first and last offensive plays of this game, there were some tackle-eligible reporting from Dan Skipper and/or Taylor Decker, a message sent there. But, Coach, what a complete performance. And certainly it was, to quote Dickens, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. The win and the way this team played, the Lions, best of times, no question. Talk about what you saw.
Yeah, I saw an earnest, the first half, and just could see the tenor and the tone was that for the Detroit Lions, and it was in that game last year as well. We played fantastic in that first half, and then we had a third quarter that kind of bled on us a little bit, put us in that situation in the fourth where the tackle eligible stuff, worked against us with that Brad Allen officiated crew. That wasn't to be this time. They were outpaced. However, we did suffer a cataclysmic loss in the third quarter. And that was our star defensive player and star pass rusher, one of the two best, went down with that, season-ending injury. Fortunately, it does appear that surgery was very successful, and now the rehabilitation efforts will take place, and Aiden Hutchinson will return, and the sun will rise again with 97, walking up upon it. But getting back to the game, Drew, that was a sweet justice for the Detroit Lions fans. It was definitely a statement made, although you see the national pundits, there's still some on certain networks that are still not convinced and think that the opponent they're playing this week is the best team in the NFL. But last weekend, the Lions really made a statement. Yeah, I mean, Dallas is down. They're stumbling and they're kind of fighting from the corner and fighting against the ropes right now. But we laid hammer shots on them, and they did not want to respond. And this is a responders league. You know, are you going to respond like the Detroit Lions or the Minnesota Vikings or what appears to be the Green Bay Packers and Chicago Bears? I mean, we are on a historic pace for being maybe the best division in football history. You know, right now, obviously the law of averages are going to play out because we got to play each other too.
Yeah.
And a pecking order is going to be decided. But or are you going to be, you know, on the pretender side of things, which appears to be that of the Dallas Cowboys? The Philadelphia Eagles are stumbling. You know, there's kind of a, I guess the cream is starting to rise, so to speak. And there's some teams with 3-3 records that are going to be teams that are going to be competitively in it for the long haul.
Oh, yeah.
And there's some new teams entering the fray. But the Detroit Lions seem so poised. What a thorough throttling of the Dallas Cowboys. You could point me, we gave up 9 points in AT&T Stadium, 3 field goals. Aubrey was the only guy that could get anything going. I mean, you know, Prescott did next to 0. You know, Donald and you know, and company didn't hardly do anything. Zeke was a non-factor. I mean, as he's RB2 anyway.
Yeah.
But that offense was absolutely a non-factor. And yeah, that defense, yes, was minus Micah Parsons and some other key pieces, but they made, you know, they made Trayvon Diggs look very pedestrian out there.
Yes.
And you know, they just shoved him around, which is not the kind of response that I'm sure Jerry on that old 82nd birthday. But happy birthday, Jerry. I want to be 82 years old one day too. So, you know, I hope it was enjoyable on all the affordances and luxuries and appointments that you've been able to acquire in your life, which you did acquire them fair and square, but I hope you enjoyed all of them that day, except for that ass whipping you took by the Detroit Lions in your home stadium. 47-9. Happy birthday, Jerry.
It was an ass whipping.
Enjoy your cake and ice cream.
You know, there's a lot of I wouldn't say it actually hasn't been. There's been some criticism of how the Lions ran it up potentially and used a lot of trick plays. You know, they sat most of the starters in the fourth quarter, which I saw a lot of that, and you did too with the Michigan Wolverines last year during their season before they start playing Penn State or Ohio State and company. But we've rarely seen this from the Lions, and not on the winning end at least. But it was smart. The one thing I'm going to address is I've read a lot of fans, more than a few, that have complained as to why Hutchinson was even playing it 5 minutes into the third quarter. Need I remind you, go Google it, YouTube, the NFC Championship game last year, and you tell me why anyone was playing in that third quarter. And if you still think it was wrong, well, God bless you. Off you go. I mean, I got nothing to tell you, but the facts and data show that game was not in the bag at the start of the third quarter. Start of the fourth quarter, they did the right thing. They sat the starters. That's what you do, but not at the beginning of that third quarter. No way. The game was not over yet. And unfortunately, you know, Hutch got hurt on friendly fire, but that's exactly why a leg whip's a major penalty in that league. And that's what happened. It was an accidental leg whip that he actually initiated. McNeil was there, and the way he turned, I mean, it's a football play, right? And it's unfortunate, but thankfully he's going to be 100% back. It won't be till training camp of 2025, more than likely. I know there's talk that he could be ready for the Super Bowl. Well, that would be fantastic, but you know, let's just get Hutch right for 2025 and make sure he's ready to go. Because if this team makes it to the Super Bowl, still, you know, we're going to be rolling with him. We feel good about that, right? So
100%. 100%. And yeah, I mean, we can be wishful thinkers, and sports does that for us. Well, you know, sports, there is no greater creator of hope than sports and sports fandom. So, I mean, you know, hey, I wish not him play. I want the Detroit Lions to win the Super Bowl this year and with Aiden Hutchinson hurt. But I wish not he play in a Super Bowl to impact that game and cause a chronic issue in that leg which
Yeah.
shortens his career by 3-4 years, than it would be for us to have potentially a J.J. Watt caliber player here for the duration of his career that impacts more than 1 or 2 or 3 Super Bowls. So, that's what we want him for the long term. He's a young player, and there shouldn't be this go for broke sense for Aiden Hutchinson to return anytime sooner than what is the absolute best practice for rehabilitating his injury. And that's just the way we have to think in this modern day of football. But getting back to that game before, and then I know we want to transition and do some different things here and talk about how we're going to replace Hutch, because I think it's a very important topic that you and I need to spend some time on, Drew. But this is a very competitive game, and sportsmanship certainly has its place. That's a big value for me, is to be someone of class and sportsmanship, because you need to have some sort of balance when you are in the most ultimate of competitions and competitive levels. And sports is competitive. It's not nice, and it's not meant to be nice. It's cruel, and it's true, and it's honest. And some people don't like to hear that. They don't like, and that's why sports isn't for everybody. Everybody's going to get dinged. Everybody's going to be told they're no good. And sometimes it's going to show you that a little bit. And that hurts sometimes. And, but that's the reality of it. And it's how you respond and get back up is quoting Mr. Rocky Balboa, how winning is done. So, that's what we have to do. So one can look at it. Oh, the Lions were classless and we're trying to show people up and doing this, that, or the other thing. Or you could look at it this way. Last year, we came into that stadium and we competed our asses off and made a play at the end that was taken away from us. And was that very fun for us?
No.
Nope. Well, you know what? We decided that as a team, we're going to go back there and we're going to have some fun. And mission was accomplished.
Absolutely.
And you could have stopped them. I mean, you could have stopped those plays.
Yep.
And shoved them right up our ass and straightened us up and made us go back to a vanilla, let's kill the clock a game plan, but you didn't.
Yeah.
You were sitting on your heels, unwrapping the tape from your wrists.
Exactly. Staying
in the fight until that fourth quarter sits 0-0-0. That's what you do in sports. And that's not what the Cowboys were about on their owner's, celebratory birthday. Which, we can say what we want about Jerry Jones, this, that, or the other thing. Hey, that was an important day to him. And, that's not, I don't think it's a good business practice, personally, laying an egg like that on your owner's birthday. And it's being nationally televised as America's Game of the Week. Probably not the best way to keep jobs, is it, Drew?
No, not at all. And I would say this, I know they had injuries on their defensive side. I'm not underscoring that. So do the Lions. So I don't want to hear it. And I know you're not using it as an excuse. You never do. It's always next man up. Even with Hutch, it's next man up. And I get that. But that offense is a concern because that offense wasn't nicked up in Dallas, and they are very one-dimensional. You wouldn't think of Tony Pollard as that important, but I think he really was. He added another element, another option to run the football, and to not have anyone else really impact the game at the receiver position other than CeeDee Lamb. Well, that makes you very one-dimensional at that point. So they've got work to do on their offense. I still think Dallas is a good football team, and I think they're going to be in the mix as long as they get healthy on their defense and they got to figure out how to distribute that football better on offense. Detroit, we both said that we thought they'd win the game. We both thought it'd be a 4-point game, though. I had 27-23. Lions had 27 at the half. I was like, whoa, okay, that. But again, it doesn't take much you don't have to go back that far in time. You don't have to jump in the DeLorean to figure this one out. Look at the NFC Championship game. No lead safe in this league. So were the Lions piling on? No, they were not. They were playing football. Now did they get creative? Well, they ran a hook and ladder last 2 weeks ago too. It's just it involved St. Brown and Gibbs. that was okay. Well, then all of a sudden it involves Penei Sewell, and it's like, oh, they're showing him up. No, it was a surprise. Nobody expected that. And it would have counted if they hadn't called an ineligible downfield penalty, which I'm not sure how legit that was, but it is what it is. I didn't think Ben Johnson agreed with it. It was hard to tell on the replays, coach, whether Ragnow was over 5 yards past. I don't know. It was close. It was real close. But nonetheless, a huge win for the Lions. And before we preview the Minnesota game, we got to talk about, like you said, what did the Lions do to address the Aiden Hutchinson loss? And immediately, the name that came up immediately, and I get it, I would love Max Crosby in Detroit. So would every team in the league right now. And coach, he's potentially available by trade, but it's fans need to understand that the NFL's had a salary cap for a long time, decades now. So you got, whether we want to do it or not, we have to factor in, can the team afford it, the contract, the player. And so, but let's talk about it, coach. We've got 5 names here that are really the 5 marquee names that are potentially out there of players currently playing at a pretty high level right now, or in one case, someone's holding out. But talk about Max Crosby. What do you see there? How is he a potential fit in Detroit now or not?
Well, I mean, as far as a potential fit, I mean, Max Crosby is a potential fit everywhere in the league. I mean, he is an elite defensive football player, from mindset to his physical prep. He's a guy that's overcome a ton of adversity. He's humble that way in that regard. Although there are some stories leaking out as to some strange, attitude type things that are going on, and they've had him leave the facility this week a couple of times because of things. But who knows? I mean, that could be just that could be not even true, because there's so many people that just stoke fire on the internet, with no flame or smoke.
Mm-hmm.
But at any rate, Max Crosby would be, if you're going to look to replace Aiden Hutchinson straight up and down, I mean, that would be the one player that can do it, of these names that are mentioned, and really the one player that can do it probably in total, if your name maybe not Bosa.
Would agree.
That being said, there's a few layers here. Mark Davis says this is not happening. He's not being traded. That's the owner of the Las Vegas Raiders. He has said that is not happening. Max Crosby, we would owe on this season, the following season, and the following season after that. There are guaranteed number totals. And Drew, you put these up here, and we can see that in 2025, you'd earn $28.2 million, would take up $10.2 million of dead cap if he was to be released. And in 26, it'd go down to $24.8 million, and that dead cap would be at $5.1 million. Quite simply, here's what Max Crosby would cost in acquiring him. He would cost multiple likely day 1 draft picks, which, folks, that's the first round. So we'd be voiding those for the next couple of years, the 25 and 26 drafts. And there could be more compensation that would, require to, obtain Max Crosby services. Each one of these years, folks, we need to sign our own free agents if we're trying to really make this a team of a core, which is what all the great teams, consistent teams that have spanned decades of success have done. Name Green Bay Packers, name New England Patriots, name San Francisco 49ers. These teams build themselves through the draft. Pittsburgh Steelers, Baltimore Ravens. Yep. They build themselves. They may accent themselves through free agency, but they build themselves through the draft. That is the way we are doing it. That's what we have. That's our process. So making a move like this is so diametrically opposite of that philosophy that we'd be really straying from the program, going for broke per se. Well, you say, well, we're trying to win the Super Bowl, right? You're absolutely right. And that's why this is a question that it has a couple of, potentially correct answers. I would, if Max Crosby said we were going to win the Super Bowl, if we acquire Max Crosby, then we did win a Super Bowl. and a mission accomplished there. But going for this kind of long-term player in regards to having to pay them guaranteed money for the next 2 seasons after this year comes at quite a cost, Drew. Comes at quite a cost. What do you think about Max Crosby in that situation? And for that matter, what do you think? Because Harold Landry would be another player. Is Harold Landry even necessarily cheaper than Max Crosby?
And he's actually not. In reality, a little cheap, just a little cheaper next year, and only barely. I mean, not even. I mean, with 24.8 versus 24, it's almost a wash. His dead cap money is actually worse. If you wanted to part with Harold Landry, it's going to cost you $13 million in 25 and 6.5 in 26, and you're not going to get the production out of Harold Landry that you would Max Crosby. So, yeah, I mean, if you're going for broke, then Landry isn't really an option in that sense. Crosby is. But at the same time, Coach, I agree. I mean, let's face it, we've been fans since 1980. We've seen this team get a Billy Sims, and they couldn't win because they weren't able to build around him. Now, there were other reasons for that. That was just before the salary cap actually went in the NFL. I believe 87 is when the cap went in. So, we saw Barry Sanders in Detroit and very good teams, but never a team that really did anything other than the 91 squad. And that was based a lot on emotion. They were playing for Mike Utley, and they were a very good team. They were a very young team, and they weren't able to sustain that. They never really came close to that. They teased. It was a very successful decade in terms of win-loss and fun to watch. Yeah, the Lions were great to watch. And I know a lot of fans from our generation, they cling to that. We had Calvin Johnson in the 2010s, and we saw a resurgence because you could argue the 2000 to 2010 decade was the worst in Lions history, bar none. And I've looked at the stats; it's true. So as a fan base, we want that marquee name, but let's think about this for 2 minutes and 45 seconds. Didn't win anything, and it's no knock on those guys; they were great players, but when you go all in on a couple big names, man, you got to have some serious depth and serious draft acumen. And the Lions have that now. They've got big names that they pretty much drafted everybody, like you said, Coach. And I'm reluctant as a fan to say, well, the window's narrow. Well, do you want to make it a 1-year window or do you want a 4-year window? I want a 4-year window because there's no guarantee that even if they pull this trigger this year and they get Max Crosby, regardless of what they give up in terms of draft capital, yeah, they have a hell of a shot of winning, but your chances greatly diminish in 2025 through 2027 because now you got to make some tough decisions. We talked offline about this. Fans, I would love Max Crosby. I'm not down on it, but number 26, Jahmyr Gibbs, and number 9, JMO, kiss them goodbye. They will not be re-upped. They'll play their 5-year rookie deal. They'll get re-upped for that option year, 5th year, and they're gone. You cannot afford them. Brian Branch, you like him? He's pretty good. Bye-bye. You can't afford everybody. There's a cap. I'm not saying it's my preference. I'd love to have all those guys. Coach, we were hockey fans for a long time. We still are. We loved the Red Wings in the 90s. Just keep adding players. It was beautiful. And then this thing called a salary cap came in. Camelot ends. It's just the way it is. It's a business and a sport.
It's not Major League Baseball where there still is no salary cap. And even then, your pay structure is what it is. I mean, we are now, and we're not trying to go off on tangents here, but we are now kind of, I guess, been indoctrinated as to what it looks like when you build a baseball team a couple different ways. And under the Ilitch era, where there was the Mike Ilitch era and there was what appears to be the Chris Ilitch era. Mm-hmm. And this one was much more built through a pay structure, where the Mike Ilitch era was built through a checkbook. And hey, I mean, that was a beautiful thing. It was pretty successful. Ultimately, it wasn't quite successful, but it was a beautiful thing. And, hey, we have to do this through a pay structure. And I think you hit on all those points. If you're going to do it, though, I mean, obviously with these 2 names above, I mean, if you're going to do this, though, yeah, you do it all the way.
I agree.
You can commit to the Crosby camp. You can do that. And you're not an idiot for doing so. but it is going for broke. We're swinging for the fences with that one.
Yeah, and Hassan Reddick's the other name on their coach that's bigger money, and he's holding out, and he's a free agent next year. But talk about Reddick.
I think the willingness probably was, would he be willing to sign a 1-year deal at this point in time? I think the Lions inquired already on Hassan Reddick's services with the Jets. And I think it comes down to that. Would he be willing to do that? And I think he's still talking. He wants an extended multi-year deal with multiple years guaranteed. And I have a feeling that probably enters Hassan Reddick then into the same, I guess, category of this discussion from our standpoint as Max Crosby and Harold Landry, is that Hassan Reddick really is only willing to play football if he's guaranteed money in the years 2025 and 2026. I would certainly entertain Hassan Reddick over Harold Landry just because of those numbers. And if we're going to have those numbers, I'd rather have Reddick's production over Landry's. And I would certainly want Crosby over Reddick still. But that kind of tells you, I think, right then and there where they kind of stand with any kind of Max Crosby talk. Because right now, Mark Davis only wants probably the absolute premium for him. And the Harold Landry's probably not as attractive of a player, even though there's some fits there. He played for our defensive line coach with the Titans. So I would say Hassan Reddick's a no, just based off that factor. And it really brings us down to a couple of names that are on this board. And there's probably a couple of others as well that we have not or are not going to speak to. But Drew, in my opinion, Hassan Reddick is going to be, again, too expensive of a proposition.
Yeah, you're right about that, Coach. So then we jump down to another tier, but still effective players. Zadarius Smith out of Cleveland, who we're very familiar with in Detroit, with his days with Minnesota briefly and Green Bay, and then Trey Hendrickson out of Cincinnati. Little less expensive guys, effective pass rushers, no question about that. But Coach, let's start with, and we know, at least we've been told through the media outlets that the Lions have kicked the tires on Zadarius Smith already too, but a much more palatable contract, although he's age 32. Talk about Zadarius Smith.
Well, yeah, and Zadarius Smith is the type of niche of area that you're looking to acquire. He's got one extended year of guaranteed money, which is next year. And that's at $9.43 million. That's very, very doable. His dead cap number is quite high, which means Zadarius Smith would be a Detroit Lion for 2025 with outside of a very, very extreme exception. Would Zadarius Smith give us some productive pass rush? I do believe so. He is at an age where injury risk is much higher. We've already seen a second contract, and he's a third contract player, but a second contract player and Marcus Davenport not be able to endure at all, and is done for the year as well. So, I mean, we would acquire Zadarius Smith. He is at a higher risk for a more longer term injury just based off of his age. That's what the analytics would tell you and the data would tell you. And yes, production's not quite what it once was earlier in his career. So we're on a player on his decline, which we've seen players in the NFL still forge roles for themselves as role players in that later phase of their career. But I ask you this, Drew, are we looking for a role player here? We're looking for a primary pass rusher. So is Zadarius Smith the best answer for that? I don't know if he is. However, is he the best solution for what we need to work with and within the pay structure? He certainly is better than probably the guys with the 2 years of guaranteed money, because we will be able to move forward from Zadarius Smith a lot easier with our plan intact than we would with those 2-year players, 2-year guaranteed players. So I for one would not shake my head with Zadarius Smith. There's some real good reasons to do that. That being said, I also have a couple of other players. I have another player that I'm a little more intrigued by.
Yeah, you're right. And before we get to that, you're spot on. Crosby, Reddick, and Landry are going to give you every down production at a high level. Crosby being the highest. Smith is going to be a situational pass rusher. So if I'm a fan, and I am, I'm looking at the Lions, and if they were to go get Zadarius Smith, I agree, I'd be happy too. But I would also know that the James Houston experiment's probably done, because they drafted James Houston to give the Lions that situational pass rusher, and he's going to get his chance Sunday. He's going to get his chance. So it would be, we've seen lightning in a bottle with James Houston his rookie year. He didn't play the first 8 games, and then he ended up with 8.5 sacks that year. If the Lions can see that version of James Houston, which was only a couple years ago, folks, and this is a young guy, so it's potentially there still. We might not be talking about acquiring anybody else, but based on that, yeah, I mean, Smith's not going to be an every down guy, but you've got to feel, and I trust Brad Holmes on this big time. He knows talent. He knows, and if they were to get Zadarius Smith, he's going to be able to give them what they need and maybe a little more, at least next year. And then, like you said, for 2025, yeah, to have a guy like that for $9.5 million in essence, yeah, you are going to keep him because you're not going to eat that dead cap money. But talk about your the next name here, Coach. This is perhaps more palatable for fans.
Well, I think that of the 5 names on this list, one stands out to me is the guy that I would center my focus and attention towards if we could try to acquire, and that would be Trey Hendrickson, the edge player from the Cincinnati Bengals. Bengals are off to a rocky start. It's a team that had reached the pinnacle a couple of years back and played really, really tough in that game before falling short. Ultimately. But that being said, this is a guy, highly, highly productive edge player. He plays with great passion. He's considered kind of reckless, tough, full tilt type guy. Probably somebody that comes into Detroit and gets along just swimmingly with what we are trying to achieve here. Really kind of vibes off of the teammate philosophy, which is exactly what the Lions are looking for. Production-wise, is he in decline? Well, considering where he was 3-4 years ago, those numbers haven't quite been there since. However, this is a guy that really flirts in and around those double-digit sack totals, and is a guy that makes a lot of plays behind the line of scrimmage in the form of tackles for loss in the run game and in the RPO game too. So, I mean, this is a guy that is a very productive player. He is getting paid, Again, this is a Pro Bowl caliber edge football player, and in the law of diminishing returns, is he still a Pro Bowl caliber player? Possibly. He may not be in the perennial Pro Bowl discussion as he once was, but he is still a potential Pro Bowler. But he's getting paid like a perennial Pro Bowler at $18.66 million, which is what he'd be due next year. So that is, if there is a downfall to Trey Hendrickson, it is the kind of money that he would look to consume next year. But there's a caveat to that. If we need to pay some other players next year, and we identify them as the priority, Trey Hendrickson is a $2.66 million dead cap hit if we decide to walk away from him. So there is an out after 1 year, and you are now talking about the replacement for Aiden Hutchinson for the 2024 year, with the potential for him to have a 1-year partnership with this guy on the opposite side, which fills probably the biggest need on this team. And that was if Aiden Hutchinson was not hurt, which was to pair him with another high caliber pass rusher, edge setter, edge defender. So in my opinion, Drew, it's Trey Hendrickson. There's some other interesting names. I've heard Trayvon Walker's name thrown in there. Yep. But again, now you're talking about a player that probably wouldn't ultimately cost the value of it, and the trade would be amazing for the Detroit Lions. However, now you're talking about another 2-year guaranteed player. So now if you enter a fourth name into that, not named Crosby, Reddick, or Landry, you're talking about the fourth most productive player of those names as well. So again, I don't see that as an answer. To me, Trey Hendrickson is the guy that I would most like to see come to Detroit to replace Aiden Hutchinson this year.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Now, here's the other thing. We're not capologists. We know a lot about it. We got those numbers from spottrack.com too. But you can, and we've seen the Lions do this many a time. Like players will convert money into signing bonus, which guarantees the money, but it lessens the cap hit. Of course, that can be done. Now, does anyone care to venture a guess how that will work out? It would take more than a few seconds or a few minutes to really articulate that. There's a lot of accounting that would have to be done. So, if the Lions make a big move, a big splash move, like a Crosby, well, then they must have an avenue in mind financially, because they've re-upped with a lot of guys. They just re-upped with Lee McNeil for 4 more years at nearly $25 million a year, basically $24 million a year. And why would the Lions do that right after the Hutchinson injury? Well, apparently it was on the table. I mean, you don't just say, oh shoot, we got to panic, here's $100 million. No, they were obviously having talks. But the timing of the signing was interesting, Coach, to me, because it was not, number one, they wanted to get the deal done, but did it kind of send a message to themselves in a sense that we're gonna keep our own, and we need to know in concrete what we're dealing with financially. We don't want to speculate. Well, what will we pay Aleem McNeil? No, they know what they're going to pay Aleem McNeil now. They know St. Brown, Montgomery, Goff, Sewell, Decker, all those guys. And I know I left a couple out, but they know now what the implications are there. They can play with that money to make room. But again, I don't know if it'll still work. I don't want to see one great player come in here and then lose 2 or 3 very good every down guys that are contributing a hell of a lot for one splash move. It rarely works. It rarely ever works. And if it does, work for the Rams. What's their record right now? Now, I know injuries have played a part of it. How did they do against the Lions in the playoffs in the wild card round last year? Oh, yeah, they got the ring. I want to see this team sustained for the long haul. I know you do too, Coach. I don't want a 2-year splash with maybe a 1 ring, which would be awesome. My gosh. But then they have 10 years of futility and mediocrity because you can't dig out of cap hell. Not interested in that. You have a better chance of winning when you have a bigger window. To narrow that window down to 1 year, maybe 2 at the most, I'd rather have 4 or 5. That's just my view of it. So.
We've done the cap hell a couple of times and never had any rewards to have even suffered the consequences to being in it. So I mean, we know what that looks like and feels like.
Exactly.
And yeah, and they know what they want to do. They know what they want to do. So I mean, yeah, okay, a Reggie White acquisition by the Packers from the Eagles when they made that move. Okay, I mean that was one that had long-term, workout, implications to it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you had mentioned the Matt Stafford trade, acquiring Tom Brady, in the short term and getting that in Tampa. Yeah, it worked. But since then, now they have another new quarterback, and they're still a very relevant team. But they're still they're reaching at the heels of everybody else. So I mean, these kinds of moves come with consequences in this league. It's a league of parity. And as it is, supposed to be in the other leagues as well that have salary caps. But the NFL's done probably a better job than all. There are dynasties still. Kansas City's a dynasty. New England was a dynasty. There's been dynasties in this league from the very beginning. But and there still continues to be even through the pay structure salary cap era. But there are definite consequences for buying too large.
Yeah, and in the success stories we just mentioned, they have something in common. They're quarterbacks. Quarterbacks can influence the game more than any player on the field. We all know. What's that?
Except for Reggie White.
Except for Reggie White, yeah. But Stafford, Brady, those guys, I mean, those are quarterbacks. They can influence the game far more than any single player on the team. And I'm not saying that's not a knock on anyone. It's a fact. The quarterback has the ball in their hand every single snap. Every snap. So they influence the game more than anybody. So I love Crosby. If they can make it work financially, awesome. Get him here. I'm as a fan, I'm not interested in a short-term stab at victory and then having to suffer through the ramifications of it, because we're acutely aware of what that can be. Don't be a desperate fan base yet. This is a very good football team now. This is a very good football team. They have a very good shot at going to Super Bowl still now, in my view. So, hey, let's see what happens. But Coach, let's jump into next week's game, tomorrow's game, actually. Minnesota and Detroit. And then you mentioned earlier the Vikings are still viewed by some as the best team in football. And you know what? Rightfully so. They're 5-0. I believe they've had the lead in every game since the 3-17 mark of their first game. They've not been trailing. So this is a team that's really not known anything but success in this league so far. And they've done it, Coach. No JJ McCarthy, and with a cast off Sam Darnold, and with a loss of Aaron Jones. I mean, a lot of changes in Minnesota. I don't think any of us ever on our podcast ever thought the Vikings would stink, but we certainly didn't imagine that they would be leading the division at this point. They were the one team I really didn't count on to be a playoff team this year, and that was with McCarthy. What are your thoughts, Coach?
Well, they've played 5 games, and they're 5-0. And, yeah, they've been in control. I mean, they're obviously very, very well coached. I mean, you don't get that way without having great scheme and the guys executing it to, precision. Hey, I once saw Sam Darnold drive the field on Penn State in the Rose Bowl, and I thought he was going to be one hell of an NFL quarterback. And guess what? Guess what might be happening? He's turning into a hell of an NFL quarterback. That's a good football player. I don't care what people say. The Jets are a place of ruin for quarterback unless your name, is Boomer Esiason or Ken O'Brien or Joe Namath. It's just, there's been guys that have had success there, but recently that is not a place that has been very, very successful in developing a quarterback and developing that kind of player. I mean, they did they just haven't been. And, look at Mark Sanchez and Matt Stafford came into the league at the same time. Well, you haven't heard from Mark Sanchez in a long time.
Yeah, I have. He's been a color commentator.
Well, yes, you're right. No, you are right, Drew. You're right about that. But but I guess at the football field, calling signals.
No,
that Mark Sanchez has gone a long way, and the other guy is still forging out his career in the NFL. So I mean, both of them went into situations. There's a lot of people patting Mark Sanchez on the back that they're going to have equal careers. In fact, Mark Sanchez was going to be better than Matt Stafford. That didn't quite happen. But that being said, he went there and was kind of, and was sent off to purgatory, so to speak, as a quarterback in this league. And now he's resurfaced, ultimately again, a few teams later here with the Minnesota Vikings, and he's been spectacular. They have a fantastic player in Justin Jefferson, and really our most productive corner may not play in this game, and that's Carlton Davis. He's been fantastic this year, in my opinion, and he has been banged up, and I believe he's either been limited or in defense, and we have to go to their stadium. And I tell you what, this is going to be our biggest test to the year, so far this year. I'm very excited about it. I still like the matchup. I still think we're full steam ahead, but this is going to be one heck of a punch in a very tough football game.
Yeah, no doubt. This is going to be a huge game. Going to be really fun to watch. What do you see from the Vikings defense against this Lions team? We know Brian Flores is the DC, very good coach. They blitz a lot. They're a very aggressive defense. What are you seeing?
Well, and that's just, we're going to have to be, and you're going up against a check down star and Jared Goff. I mean, that's a guy that knows how to make those progressions. He's also a person that, in different packages, if you really can have some control blitzes and some delayed stuff that could really, change up his patience and his comfort in the pocket, that will become an issue for him, because we know that he can throw the ball errantly over the middle of the field. Those would be the things that you would try to do, is get someone coming, in front of him so that he would throw the ball over the top to, errantly to a purple jersey. They ultimately have to stop our run game. You know, that they can blitz, but you know, are we still getting 3.5 to 4.5 yards a crack, 5 yards a crack? If that's the case, you know, you can blitz all you want. You know, we're still gashing in the run game, and I like our chances of doing some different things with motion and being able to guess over the top of those blitzes and getting some guys wide open. It's going to come down to Drew, and you know, we have time. You need to share your thoughts. But I mean, offensively, we know who we are, and no, you're not going to make a living with trick plays in this game.
No.
But we have to take advantage of those blitzes and capitalize on them and and hit the spots that are opened up because of those blitzes. But above and beyond all, Drew, we've got to control that line of scrimmage and run the football like the Detroit Lions do when we're successful. If we're doing that, we are successful.
Yeah, and I think my favorite thing about this team this year, other than the camaraderie and tightness of this group, and Coach Campbell said it in the locker room last week. I mean, it's amazing, and you could see it last year even too. But we don't have to work. We're not, when we talk about the Lions, it's not, well, how do we counter what the other teams bringing? No, it's the Lions are going to do their thing on offense. What are you going to do to stop it, Minnesota? That's the question. You want to stop the run? No problem. We can throw. You want to stop the pass? No problem. Here's it's Sonic and Knuckles, right? Montgomery and Gibbs. The game plan this week, I believe, because of the aggressiveness of the Vikings, their MO is you set up the pass with the run. Establish the run early, perhaps often, to do what you need to do to loosen that pressure up, to loosen up and to force them to bring a safety down low. And then once you do that, well, who are you going to cover? You're going to double St. Brown? No problem. You got nobody who can keep up with number 9. Nobody. Most teams don't. And you want to concentrate on those cats? No problem. There's a guy named Sam Laporta, 87. He can get you. He will gouge you. The running backs out of the backfield can catch the football and hurt you. The Lions offense is just so dynamic. And by the way, all of that's possible because there's 5 guys on that line that make it possible. It takes a Herculean effort defensively to really impact the Lions and force them into situations they're not comfortable in. And the only way to do that is to force Jared Goff out of the pocket, like you said, and good luck. If you can do it, God bless you. It's not going to happen very often. There's very few teams that have been able to do that. And now I saw Zeitler on the injury report as a little nicked up. I'm hoping he's good to go. We'll see. We know in a pinch, Graham Glasgow can switch over to right guard. The guy's like a Swiss Army knife on that line. I mean,
Tika comes in at left,
who played very well 2 weeks ago.
He's a great left side of the line player.
The unsung heroes of that line are Graham Glasgow and Iowa Sika. There's no doubt about it. There's been injuries last year, of course, this year already. Those guys fill right in. I mean, you want to talk about a 6th man? Iowa Sika is your guy. And just Mr. Versatility is Graham Glasgow. We know how great Ragnow is. We know how great the tackles Decker and Sewell are. But those guys have really stepped up big time. But yeah, I think that's how the Lions are successful in this game. Establish that run early and then loosen up for the pass. It also will help them kill the clock. I think the way to keep Minnesota at bay as well is let's face it, don't let Justin Jefferson. Yeah. There you go. Exactly. So that's how I see this one, Coach, at least in terms of the offensive side of the ball. But let's talk about how the Lions defense needs to attack this Minnesota offense, Coach. Obviously, 97's not in. This is the first game they're going to play this year without Aiden Hutchinson. How are you seeing this shake out? What do you think Aaron Glenn's going to drop to? In essence, I mean, you got to respect Sam Darnold. And then, of course, the running game now, Minnesota's a little nicked up. Aaron Jones is likely not playing in this game. They just traded for Cam Akers. So you're going to see a little bit there. How do you see the Lions attacking this offense?
Well, I mean, you don't, as a defensive coach, you don't just go in with plan A and plan A doesn't work. I mean, that's just not how it works ever. on defense. And, that goes with that of personnel too. And you do have to meld and at the NFL level, when you have, just so many talented players on your roster, it looks a little different in high school because you have to play with what you have. You got to work with what you have. And as you go through the tiers of college, there's less of that. And you get to choose pretty much what you have. And those guys are in this situation. Yet when you have a deficit in production, like what they're going to feel with Aiden Hutchinson's loss, it's a personnel issue. Then it becomes a scheme issue. Yeah, they're not going to be able to do the same things and generate and get the same kind of production just by inserting a player. That analytically doesn't really tell the tale. So yeah, are they going to have to do some different things? Yes. However, if they overplay it and get too far away from who they are, that spells recipe for disaster. And I think they've done that a couple of times this year. They did it against Seattle, and you saw what that happened. We went from that game to where we couldn't stop a soul back in Ford Field ourselves with the Seattle Seahawks, to then absolutely just throttling down the Dallas Cowboys in AT&T Stadium and giving up only 3 field goals. Obviously, there's some different things. The good news is when Aiden Hutchinson came out of the game, Dallas still did not score a touchdown. So, we were able to do some different things. We can't overplay his departure and now run a completely different defensive look that the team is, that spells for different holes in different areas that get quickly exposed. We've got to stay true to who we are. We got to stop the run and make Sam Darnold throw it on our terms. And that will be the best case scenario. I am concerned over Carlton Davis's health. If he is not able to play, that's going to thin us out. That's going to make stopping Justin Jefferson that much more difficult.
Yeah, I would say for the running game with Aaron Jones out, and Akers can hurt you, no question about that. But I think they may need to try and maybe initially double team Jefferson. Although their MO this year, and I really like this, is aggressive man coverage. Now, mind you, that's with Carlton Davis in the game. You would think you would draw that assignment. If he's not, Terrion Arnold's likely going to draw that assignment. I think athletically he can handle it, but Justin Jefferson's so good. So I don't care who you are, he's going to get his. So I think the Lions, at least in the last couple of years, have played defensively against Minnesota that, okay, Justin Jefferson's going to get his. I think he had over 200 yards one game last year against the Lions. Did the Vikings beat the Lions? No. So you can go at it that way. Here's the thing too. Sam Darnold is more of a conventional passer. They've been facing some running quarterbacks lately. Dak can move. Geno Smith certainly can. Kyler Murray, we know what he can do. They played brilliantly against Arizona defensively, the way they were able to contain him in the pocket, just like they needed to. With Darnold, yeah, you gotta put him under some duress, and you gotta make him throw when he doesn't want to do it. When you want him to, like you said, you got to dictate what that quarterback does. Easier said than done. On paper, you would think the assignment's easy, but no, it's not, because Sam Darnold's been playing great football right now. I know the Lions respect it, and if fans don't, they're not playing the game, but he's a good one. What do you think of Darnold on the run when he throws, Coach? Because I'll admit I haven't seen him in a while, but I know what he could do in college, certainly. But throwing on the run, I don't know how much they've really asked him to do that in Minnesota this year. I'm not sure he can move. I know he has some mobility. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's not his game, so to speak. He's a guy that can kind of step up in the pocket. He can do some shifting right and those kinds of things, but he's a guy that wants to be a vertical passer downfield. And that has to just they have to confuse that. They have to pressure him still in certain ways and make him struggle like he had in those previous eras. But, Sam Darnold did come in. He threw an interception his first career game at Ford Field, and, we ran it back, and then he settled down and had a great game. So, he's a guy that has had some success against the Lions. Drew, we're getting to that point where we need to make a decision here. We need to make a call on who's going to win this football game, what that's going to look like. So, Drew, where are you going with this thing?
Yeah, I like the Lions still. I'm not going to jump off that wagon even without Hutch. This is going to be a tough football game. I know we thought that Dallas game was going to be close, and it should have been, and it wasn't. Thankfully, that favored the Lions. I have this one going 23-16, Coach. I think it's going to be a tight game. I think they're going to be – I hope what this game's going to end up is where the Lions can get out to a 2-score lead, like a 10-0 lead, and then, quite frankly, never let it get much closer than 3 points. I think they're going to take control early and then be able to hold that. It's going to be a slugfest. What I really am hoping to see, though, Coach, is that somebody steps up, James Houston, wink, wink, and says, I got this. I will give you what you need. Let's make this happen, fellas. They're going to rally around the injury, and I'm really looking forward to them winning this football game, Coach. Oh, how do you see it?
I see them a very, very similar thing. I think we're going to get out to a 2-score lead. How that looks, I'm not sure if we're going to go back and forth, kick some field goals, or score some touchdowns and feel each other out. And then eventually the Lions are going to do their thing in the first half, get about a 2-score lead, and maintain that throughout the majority of the game. And I think late, it may get to a 1-score, but I'm going to go a little higher scoring than that. I'm going to go Lions 31, Vikings 24, and they will likely onside kick and we'll recover to kill that clock out. Or we will get a kickoff and have to get a first down or two to ice things out. But I'm saying 31-24 Lions. I'm thinking like you, though, big first half.
Yeah, and then the Lions have shown that pretty much all year. They've been able to score a lot of points in the first half. The second half's been up and down a little bit, but hey, this is a 4-1 team. So, and then that one loss against Tampa Bay, ample opportunity to win that football game late in the fourth quarter. Didn't work out, but it's okay. You know, they weren't eliminated from the playoffs in that game, right? So there's a lot of football.
Much better since then.
Before we wrap this one up, Coach, I want to ask you this. Hypothetically, if the Lions lose this game, it's probably a loaded question, but I guess it's going to depend on how it would happen. But if the Lions lose this game, what are your thoughts on what the next move might have to be? And that's a loaded question.
You know, look, there doesn't necessarily have to be a move. I mean, just because we lose a game doesn't mean we have to make all sorts of different. I mean, I don't really look at it that way at all. You know, we would have to definitely look at as to why we struggled. If it was a defensive struggle, was it because we struggled with, you know, developing a pass rush? Were we not setting good edges? Was it the edge of our defensive line? That was our struggle. We do have to look like we need to make a move there. But I mean, you know, you're going to lose where they're not going to go 16-1. So, I mean, you know, we have to go through there. Yeah, it's a loss to the NFC North leading team, but you move forward and adjust and win the next 3 or so games and get yourself to 7-2. You know, I mean, that's what you do.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think unless the lack of a pass rush is the issue, yeah, there's no panic at all. I mean, this is a very good football team they're playing against. And quite frankly, I mean, even going into the season, my mindset was you got to be 4-2 in this division, hopefully sweeping the Vikings. But now I'm thinking, even if they're 3-3, you know, you split with everybody. Okay, well, that means you're 7-4 at this point. Okay, that's not so bad. That's a playoff team, and it's a matter of just getting in. Now, obviously, the Lions would love to have home field. In that respect, even though this is an early game, it's an important game. It would tie them with the Vikings for first place, and it would give them that tiebreaker in the division and for playoff seeding for the head-to-head. So very important game, but not a make or break for the season type of game, certainly. But we both have the Lions winning this one. We're looking forward to watching that. Everybody, thank you for subscribing. Thank you for watching. We're on the ESEN network every Saturday night at 7 p.m. now, so take a look at that. We're on YouTube. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. So take a look at us. For Coach Andy Shield, Marine City Mariners, my name is Drew. Take care, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you soon. This has been the Sports Peninsula Podcast. To subscribe to the podcast, simply click the subscribe button on our YouTube channel's homepage and give us a like. You can also follow our audio podcast on multiple platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Google Podcasts, just to name a few. Give us a follow on Twitter. Our handle is @SportsPodcast to check out our latest releases. Thank you again for watching and for your support. Remember, when you want to hear all about sports in the great state of Michigan, there is only one Sports Peninsula Podcast.